Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you join us in the different parts of the world. My name is Sandra Carvao, and I'm in charge of the Market Intelligence and Competitiveness Department at the World Tourism Organization. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all today to this webinar. We will be having the pleasure of listening to Professor Dimitrios Buhalis from the Bournemouth University, who's already online with us. But before we do that, I would just like to share with you a very short introduction on the impacts of COVID-19 on tourism, the latest assessment done by the World Tourism Organization to set up the tone for the presentation that will follow, and also for your questions that we will be very happy to hear from in the chat. Also, we are in YouTube Live for those who cannot join us through Zoom. I know that the webinar had a very high demand, so very happy to see all the interest. But for those who are not here, we're also being followed in YouTube, but we will be getting your questions through both systems, so don't worry. And without any further delay, I will immediately share the latest UNWTO assessment in terms of the impact of COVID in international tourism. So I'm going to share my screen with you. And very briefly, as we're in a moment of great uncertainty, I'd just like to do a little preamble to this presentation, saying that the hardest moment of doing any estimate or forecast is the moment we're living in. And as you've seen, many estimates are revised over and over. What I'm going to share with you was our assessment done and in late March, which obviously is now being revised based on the first data that we start coming in from the countries. And we will do another update in the beginning of May. But I think to put the impact of the current crisis into context, this is a very important point. So just to give you a little bit of an indication, we've seen that most countries in the world are now into an internal lockdown, but obviously also in terms of the impact of travel restrictions, we're seeing that almost 90% of the world is literally closed to any travel. As the pandemic evolved, more and more countries have imposed travel restrictions in their borders, which means that for international tourism, we're in a situation of what we can call a total close down. This situation has evolved very quickly, as you see in the space of weeks. We've come from the 9th of March in the beginning of the month with parts of Africa, America still open, most of Europe impacted, into late March, almost a total lockdown around the world. What does this mean in terms of our forecasts? And as I mentioned in the beginning, this was an assessment done around a month ago. We were estimated by then that we would have a decrease of -20 to -30% in terms of international travel. If you look back into all the years that we had some kind of major crisis impacting on tourism, the one that had the biggest decrease was in 2009 when we had the economic crisis. Even in September 11 attacks, the impact in Americas was big, but not so much in the world. The same with the epidemic of SARS in 2003. Obviously, what we've seen in the last month is something that is totally unseen for us. So those estimates were based on the possibility of having a low demand during 6 to 7 months and some recover towards the end of the year. But obviously that recover will now be very different, because the biggest challenge we have is the uncertainty regarding when and how borders might open. What does this mean, again, to put you in context? And I think this is a very important point as we look in the future. If we would have a decrease of 20 to 30%, that would mean that international tourist arrivals overall in the world will be back into the levels that they had in 2012, 2014. So when we come back to the market, and obviously if the impact is probably higher than what we're estimated in this moment, what we will have is a supply capacity that was not adapted to the demand that we will have. So this will be probably, apart from obviously the biggest challenges in terms of liquidity, of the survival of companies, is that the ones that will survive and the capacity that we have in the market will be very disadjusted to the demand that we will have. If we look in terms of international tourism receipts, that would mean that the world will be losing around 1/3 of all the exports that are generated by tourism. Obviously, this will impact mostly all countries in the world. It is said that domestic tourism is expected to start recovering quicker than international. And the challenge is that for many countries around the world, international tourism is actually the backbone of their sector. If we look to many islands, if we look to Africa, if we look to other countries, this will be one of the biggest challenges that we as an international community will face moving forward. Again, this will mean we will be back into levels of what we have seen some 5 to 7 years ago. So our biggest impact in terms of international tourism receipts would mean that we will be losing 1/3 of all the tourism exports that are generated around the world. Again, this crisis is different from all the others that we've seen, and also the different scenarios are shaping up according to the issue of opening up, because this will be really the biggest challenge. And obviously after that, the issue of confidence in travel. We've seen that, for example, it took at least 5 months into seeing some kind of recovery after SARS in Asia and the Pacific. If you look at the graph, the lowest point arrived into -44, which is probably double at this point. But we did have a V-shaped recovery, which is something that we probably will not see now. On the other side, if we look at the impact of the world international tourist arrivals based on the global economic crisis, we see that obviously the impact was lower, but it was much more extended in time. So we would not see growth until the end of the year. If we combine the length of the economic crisis with the deep of what we will see, then we will probably be seeing some kind of rebound to slowly in the coming month of the end of the year. But again, the big challenge at this point is when and how borders may open and how consumers will react to those openings. One of the biggest challenges we'll also have in terms of international tourism and impact in the sector is obviously that of employment. Following the global economic crisis, tourism was one of the sectors that has created more jobs. Based on ILO data, we see that employment in all sectors grew like 10% between 2010 and 2018, while employment in accommodation and food service grew 3 times more. The challenge in this crisis is that although in the economic crisis, we were one of the sectors that actually contributed more to job creation, we might not see this in this crisis, but we need to reinforce the capacity that the sector has to create jobs, because we're one of the most labor-intensive sectors. And as such, we're one of the sectors which is critical to support in this transition to post-COVID recovery. So what has UNWTO been doing in this area? I think it's important for us to share our guidance. So the Secretary General has convened a Global Tourism Crisis Committee, where at global level there is a follow-up of the situation and also the measures that would be adequate to support the countries in dealing best with the current crisis. This committee includes, besides UNWTO, the World Health Organization, the International Civil Aviation Organization, the International Maritime Organization, which deals mostly with issues of cruise lines, IATA for the airlines, CLIA for cruises, the World Travel and Tourism Council, and also Airports Council International. It's important that we share information on what's happening, but also on the measures that countries which will start to open have implemented, because those can be very important to follow. Also, UNWTO has produced a set of recommendations for governments, mostly calling to have support measures to support jobs, to support the companies towards this period, and also to collaborate public and private sector in monitoring the crisis and also moving forward in finding the solutions to move towards recovery. Those recommendations are available online and you can find them. They're very detailed. There are 23 recommendations, and besides that, they're then divided into several items that can be of inspiration to countries and governments at local, at national level around the world. Another activity that we have put forward, and actually the deadline is tomorrow, 22nd of April, is a challenge we've called Healing Solutions. And what we're looking for is ideas that can help destinations in the process of recovery, in the different phases, in the issue of safety and security, in the issues of marketing, in the issues of market intelligence. So if you're interested, the deadline is tomorrow, but we hope that also by nurturing ourselves from different ideas around the world, we can help countries moving towards a better mitigation of the current crisis. We've also launched a communication campaign, which is called Travel Tomorrow, Stay Home Today, Travel Tomorrow, to make sure that travel is still in the mind of people. We know that the biggest challenge will be economic confidence and safety and security. So obviously it is important to have that in mind and to track that information. And with Professor Buhalis, we will surely be talking about how market intelligence is key at this moment to understand the market. Finally, just before I close my intervention, I'd like to share with all of you a tool that's available at UNWTO website, which is the UNWTO Tourism Dashboard, which is an online tool that gathers data for countries in terms of their performance in the key indicators of international tourism, international tourist arrivals, receipts, and expenditure. And what we want is to provide a one-stop shop for data. This is an ongoing project that will include in the beginning of the month also the first data by country for 2020. And you can find it online, and I'm going to try and show it to you in my computer, just what kind of information you have there. This is the example of a country profile where actually you can compare destinations on key indicators. For example, look into the weight of international tourism in exports, which, as I was mentioning, in some of the countries will be critical, as many countries don't have a domestic market. If you go, for example, to the islands of the Caribbean, where we see for Antigua and Barbuda that in 2018, 83% of their total exports actually came from tourism. So those are the economies which are at this moment among the most vulnerable to the impacts of COVID-19, and obviously the ones that need help to ensure that the livelihoods continue to subsist until international tourism can reassume. I invite you to explore. For the moment, the data on a monthly basis only covers now 2019, but as I mentioned, it will soon include data for 2020, where you can follow what are the movements in international tourist arrivals by month, and also compare your own destinations with your competitors and many other indicators. So this was to close on the importance of having monitoring systems that can actually give you insights into data. And also one of the opportunities is also to look into the markets that, for example, in the past have tended to recover quicker from crisis. With that, I will now stop sharing my screen and get back to being with you. I will open from the floor for any specific questions you might have, or any specific comments. We do have the chat, and if you don't have any questions now, we can always take them at the end of the session. And I will pass the floor to Dr. Dimitrios Buhalis, who's with us from a very nice beach in the UK.
Bom dia, alegria, as they say in Portuguese, and I think that's one of the nicest things we can hear on those particular days. Thank you for the invitations, and thank you also for your presentation, because it's excellent to see, to try to predict what's happening. I think it's really, really difficult to predict what's happening, given that everything is moving so fast. And what I'd like to do, based on the discussion we had, is to provide some qualitative indicators of what is happening and where I see things going, and how we can actually move to a new situation the day after, gradually. I'm going to take you through a lot of pictures, so because pictures can enable us to share a lot of information very, very quickly. But it's all about how smartness and nowness that is using ambient tourism enable us to support those in need in in the COVID-19 era. I think a little bit of theory and a little bit of background what we're trying to do. Really, what we're trying to do normally for tourism organizations and destinations is to have a strategic management that enable us to develop our competitive advantage, differentiate through value co-creation, enhance our reputation and image, nurture new business models so we can have innovation, investment, and wealth. And we need to develop our sustainability through resource optimization. We're doing all that to maximize the value and the benefits that we have for all our stakeholders. Our stakeholders are primarily local residents, employees, but also our customers, the people who are coming to the destination. Some of the old kind of information that I've been working on for a long time, it's really about creating equitable returns for the resources utilized in the tourism industry. And this is something that we did about almost 30 years ago, looking into what is coming, what exogenous variables and what market forces are coming into a place to enable the tourism system to operate. I don't have the time to go through all of that, but actually this is giving us the theoretical background and the synthesis, the framework to do the synthesis on what's happening in there. And what we have is normally the 5 main stakeholders that they're all pushing for their own interests and benefits. And also they've got their own responsibilities. But given the crisis, a lot of those things are changing. So we're totally in balance. So it's business as unusual because everything is moving into a different way. And we try to develop all the facilities that we've got, all the resources we've got, together in order to package our tourism industry and to create and using technology to actually distribute and promote this technology. This is a graph from a publication I've done in '93. This was the first destination management system designed back in the late '80s, and that is still very valid about developing the tourism destinations and supporting the tourism destinations through each stage of their life cycle. And that is something that provides us the background. So when you see COVID-19, COVID is a crisis unlike any other. Most of the crises that we had to deal with in tourism have happened over a short period of time, and then we went to recovery. COVID, we've been in COVID for about 5 months, and God knows for how long we'll be in here. September 11 probably happened for about 4 hours, the crisis, and then we went to recovery. The tsunami happened for about 45 minutes to 1 hour, and then went to recovery. This is really difficult on this situation. So COVID is going to be with us for a while, and we need to learn how to deal with that. And we need to see how we can take forward the industry towards maximizing, optimizing the benefits and reducing the cost of what we have. And Sandra already mentioned that there are some destinations, especially islands and insular and peripheral areas, where they depend in tourism much more. So I was speaking with colleagues and I did an interview in Corfu. 75% of the GDP of Corfu is depending on tourism. So these are the situation we find around the world. right now. We've got 2.5 million people that they are on corona cases. We've got 170,000 deaths as of today. Some places are much more hit than others. All the statistics are out there to see. And it's a tragic, tragic loss of life. And it's a tragic situation that we have around the world right now. This is Bournemouth this time last year, and it was sunny and it was Easter break and everybody was on the beach. This is Bournemouth this year. You can see what's happening around the world. This is Bournemouth Airport, where we've got all the airplanes from British Airways being parked there on the runways. And this is tourism ground zero. So we've effectively stopped tourism. We've got some benefits. You can get cheap petrol. As of yesterday, they can pay you to buy barrels of petrol because of the collapse of the demand for petrol. So you can see these things have never happened before. We are facing totally unprecedented situations, and we've seen so much pressure on the health system around the world, and this is really a crisis beyond belief. Now, if you go back to theory about crisis is normally happening at 6 stages, and this is from Bill Faulkner, but several years back. The pre-event, the prodromal, the emergency, the immediate, the long-term recovery, and the resolution. Now, the problem is that in tourism, a lot of businesses and a lot of governments are not really very much prepared before we go to a major crisis. So the pre-event, the prodromal, is quite negligible in many situations. So we find ourselves on the emergency, and we're trying to do crisis management on the flight. We're trying to do crisis management as things are happening. But I think everything that I'm going to say from now on forward will be packaged in 3 things, really. The first one, the 3 periods. The first one is the emergency situation that we're facing now. The next thing is the immediate period after that, which is really about how can we go to some kind of new normality. And the third thing is the long term. I think the long term, we're kind of pack it for the time being because we've got to deal with emergency and the immediate after. And then we're going to go into a Vision 2030. Sandra, the WTO, myself, and several other people have already started looking into what's happening on the longer term and what's happening on the resolution stage, where we need to prepare for the next 10 years of tourism. I think everything that we know about a crisis is all about speed, it's all about context, and it's really about real time. And that's, I've done a paper recently with Yeyen Sinarta looking into the real time of tourism and how we can actually answer to that. You'll see some of these things. They're in LI, it's very used to crisis, and quite often they've got to go out and rescue people. You really need to think how long they've got to go this boat from the parking position all the way launched and going out to save time. What's the response time? I think the RNLI is trying to do it within 3.5 minutes by getting all the crews in place and run. And they've practiced and practiced and practiced. I think a lot of organizations in tourism will need to learn from crisis management, and we need to understand how it's happening. Now, I was very much alert quite early from what's happening, and I start realizing how the world is going to suffer from coronavirus. So I started from the 3rd of March on my blog, talking about brace, 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 telling the world that we are going to go in a very difficult situation, and we need to start preparing for it. And on the 26th of March, I said to the Greek hoteliers on a seminar that, look, I'm not sure if we're going to have a summer season. And on the 1st of April, I said, tourism is on ground zero, and we're not going to be able to do awful lot in 2020. And then I'm start looking to some positive kind of things, and you'll see some of those things. Yesterday, South African Airlines and Virgin Australia filed for bankruptcy. Flybe had done that before. Norwegian subsidies have also come forward, and and they file for bankruptcy. There's a lot of issues that airlines are facing currently and who have a major impact. Now, this morning I was just preparing again. I was looking again what we're going to do, and I think this is really interesting how Gabrielle Treno has actually portrayed this. And she said, the first stage is survival, understanding how we can survive. And we are looking to all the information, and there's anxiety on people on how to deal with these things. Then we've got acceptance. There's nothing we can do about it. And therefore we need to prepare better, and we need to operate within our means and to look what we're going to do. And then the next stage is growth. How can we learn from this experience, and how can we go to the new reality? Resilience is all about the new reality. And how we are going to grow out of this to the new reality. Having said that, I'm spending a lot of time with friends and colleagues from around the world who are still in kind of denial. They say, "Why me? I've needs, I've got pay, I've got salaries to pay, I've got rent to pay. It cannot happen to me really, and it shouldn't really affect me." And I think this is the denial stage. And I've spent the last month telling people that we need to move on to survival skills and then acceptance and growth. And that is really critical in order to be able to do that. Portugal has done a fantastic job in coming up with this video, which I don't have the time to play, that says, this is the time to stop so we can play again. And it just gave immediately that kind of feeling that, I'm sorry, there's a major thing happening. We cannot have tourists flying around, but we need to look after ourselves in order to play again. And the WTO came up and says that we need solidarity, commitment, and support, and we need to get us all together. And Sandra already explained that through the crisis committee and what they do. I came up with 4 words: humanity first, solidarity, then resilience, then leadership. And I'll take you through each of those words very quickly, and I'll show you some examples because those are critical on facing the emergency and how we're going forward. And I think everything that is happening right now is taking us away from me to we. We are all on this together, and we have got to work together. And it's all about solidarity. It's all about showing humanity to those people in need. And those people in need are us and codependents. So they are staff and employees, they're collaborators, and they're also customers. And it's all about empathy, and it's all about sympathy. And it's all about community support. So basic things like give blood, all the way to what tourism has got that can actually support community. So we really need to show how tourism supports the community rather than the community supports tourism. And I think this is really, really critical. We need to identify who is in urgent need, from the elderly, the disabled, the poor and the marginalized, the homeless, the drug addicts, and communities in need. And more importantly, health professionals who are on the first line, and they are fighting for us. It's all about giving blood. It's all about solidarity. With Kyros Asfis, we created something on Facebook that's called 360 Tourism Solidarity. And we are trying to showcase all these fantastic businesses that they come forward, and all these fantastic people who actually demonstrate humanity. I've showcased a couple of things here. The Feed NHS, where a lot of restaurants in London came forward to feed people who are fighting on the first line, on the hospitals. And Captain Tom is an amazing guy who started, he's 99 years old, he's gonna be 100 years old very soon. And he started raising money. He aimed to raise £1,000 by walking around on his front yard. And he ended up so far to raise £27 million for the NHS by 1.2 million supporters. It has been incredible. And I think he's the hero of the COVID in the UK, if not in the world, because every single little help can support. And I was looking around for good examples, and I found this place called the Marouli, Tomarouli in Greece, in Rhodes. It means the lettuce. And these guys, what they've done is they started feeding people that they were in need. They are providing 200 portions of food every day for anybody who needs them. So they've got a help yourself, and then they create a community around them. Other people gave them food and ingredients, and they cook it. And you know, on Sunday it was Greek Easter, so they had red eggs, and they've got it's the epitome of the community really that would take us forward. Leaders begin with the different questions on others. They're replacing what I can be blame, who I can blame, with whom how am I responsible for things? And I think leadership is the most critical thing. I've looked at Arne Sorenson, the chief executive of Marriott, and his message. Again, you can see that on YouTube. I don't have the time to show you that to you. And also, when I really looked for a real leader in a real crisis, I remembered Captain Sully, who managed to get this plane in Hudson River in New York because he didn't have another choice. And that really is the epitome of what we need to do. That's another video that you can see how he didn't land, but he watered the Airbus A320 on Hudson River in New York. And it took him 210 seconds to actually do that. And he is so focused on what he had to do in the emergency situation that is so refreshing. And we need to actually learn from Captain Sully. We need to try to do the right thing every time to perform at our best, because we never know which moment in our lives we'll be judged on. And I suggest that you follow Captain Sully. And actually, especially in the US right now, there's a huge need for leadership and humanity. And I think a lot of people will find that really refreshing. In situations like that, the only certainty is uncertainty, and the crisis is predictable, but the response is debatable. If we fail to prepare, we need to prepare to fail. So within that kind of background, I'll show you some of the research that we've been doing in Bournemouth University about smart and agile tourism, which is really about bringing together all the different actors and take advantage of interconnectivity and interoperability of technologies to understand what is happening in real time. Normally, when we came up with that was how can we improve the experience of tourists, how can we improve the economic and the socio-cultural and the environmental impacts for destinations, and how can we bring all the stakeholders together to maximize the value. I think now we're in a situation where, because of crisis, we really need to use smartness for survival, and the intermediary, the immediate after phase, where we need to come back into some kind of new normality. Smartness is all about networks. It's all about the Internet of Things and the Internet of Everything. It's all about sensors and beacons, big data and data analytics. It's all about social media, Web2. And it's all about using all this technology to understand the context in real time. So we can provide information to those people who need it in real time. Now, normally this traveler will go around and enjoy the destination and enjoy the different areas. Now, quite often, this traveler is in need. They're trying to come back from wherever they may be stuck on, and they may like to decide whether they should go on holiday in July or in October and where exactly they should go. And a lot of smartness coming through personalization, contextualization of service, and co-creation of experience through sharing those experiences. It engages technology before we travel, during the travel, and after we travel. And I think when you have a rapid situation like what we have here, where everything is changing so rapidly, you really need to be able to provide the right information to the right people at the right time in the right context. And that is really critical. And also you need to understand what you need to do as a tourism organization to understand what do you need to do next? What is the strategy that you need to adopt next? Should I open? When should I open? Am I allowed to be open? and what should I do to actually connect with my markets. Smartness is bringing together technology, people, and leadership, and brings together the economic actors, the technological actors, and the security actors to co-create value within the ecosystem. I think now, if I had to revise this this graph, I'll add security, safety, security, and also I'll add medical actors, because we are almost at the mercy of the epidemiologists. We are just, I'm just following all the epidemiologists to understand what is the situation, and to learn from their experience and their expertise on what can we do so we can avoid losing more human life, but also what can we do to actually bring the economy back to, and the tourism activity back to the next normality that's going to come forward. And it's all about creating a personalized experience by bringing together, on the one side, the supply side, on the other side, the demand side. And I think this is really critical, because we really need to look into the co-creation before the travel, during the travel, and the after the travel. What we've experienced in the last few months, when people were trapped into places that they couldn't fly because of restrictions, and they couldn't actually use the normal facilities that we normally use because of restrictions. A lot of people went on to technology to understand what is available, what is the best solution in their situation at their airport, and what will facilitate their movement to their destination, where they want to go. I mean, normally we're talking about leisure travelers who are traveling because of pleasure. But in the last 2 or 3 months, we had a lot of people who were repatriating. They were moving around. They were going back. They were stuck in places, and they had to do emergency travel. Not only business travelers, but also leisure travelers, that they were somewhere. I've started the hashtag reignite tourism, because we really need to reignite tourism and see how we can go to beautiful places like Naxos, which in the photograph. It's about the era of smartness and agility, where we collect data rapidly and we analyze rapidly, and we make decisions in real time. Quite often people will make decisions within a horizon of 3, 5, 6 months or 1 year. I think now we are getting to a situation where we need to have real-time decision-making and instant response, and to be proactive and reactive, because the data and the information changing so rapidly, that is the whole context is dramatically changed. And quite a lot of friends are saying, you need to be a little bit more optimistic. Can you tell us something to cheer us up? And I said, look, every crisis is bringing an opportunity, and smartness will improve agility, it'll improve competitiveness, and eventually we're going to go to value co-creation for all. And tourism will be a critical factor for developing the new realities and the new economics that will take, especially those communities in need, forward. We'll need to bring together the context, internal context and external context, in the destination and within the tourism system, to actually optimize the value that can be done. And when we're talking about internal and external context, we're talking about political situation, travel advice, traffic, strikes, delays. So the travel advice will be critical. Quite a few governments right now are advising everybody not to travel. And we need to follow this up to understand when is travel will be advisable again, and to understand how we can actually facilitate that in the emergencies, and the different contexts in different destinations. This is our internal context. And I think a lot of issues are related with the internal context, what people like and what goals have we got, and what tasks and preference they've got. And also, what is their emotional status, their abilities or disabilities and approaches. I mean, during the crisis, a lot of people were asking me, how can we deal with the customers? And I said, leave them alone. Leave travelers alone, unless I've got a travel activity that's coming very, very soon. I would suggest that you leave them alone to digest what's happening, to survive, to go to the supermarket and face their own realities, and then come back to different things. Some of you may have seen some of my presentations, but it's all about sensors and understand what's happening around. And it's all about understanding how can we collect information from wherever the information is available. I'm going a little bit faster so I can take you to the next stage and understand what's happening in social media, what people are discussing about, and how is that affecting our brands and how does it affect our travel activity. We need to listen, to engage, to learn, and to co-create. But where in the past we use that primarily for promotion, I think right now we need to use it primarily for passing on this solidarity, this humanity, and to support each other. And to say, look, it's a crisis, it's gonna go away eventually. How long it's gonna take, nobody really knows. There are predictions about 12 months, 18 months, and then somehow we'll be here and we'll build our relationship to see how things are gonna happen. This is basically a system that we've created about smart hospitality that brings all the big data on the cloud and supports decision making. I think these are the level of detail that we need to understand in each particular place to understand what can we do to manage the situation and to understand what data do we need and to have real-time data that is coming to the decision makers and to spread this information and to help everybody with this information to take things forward. I think eventually what you have got is, we've got a smart tourism framework that's emerging, where you've got the tourism suppliers, you've got the information that's going up on the cloud that creates value and then comes down to consumers as value, and then that gives us as a feedback. In normal situations, we do that to maximize the benefit that we provide to the stakeholders, the value that we co-create with the stakeholders. I think in a crisis situation, it's really about survival. It's all about enabling people to take cover, enable people to improve their situations, and then get us ready to the next immediate stage and the longer term. So it's really about how can we keep the engine running and how can we understand what's happening around us by looking into all the data that's available in this particular moment, so we can design the next stage. And the next stage we may not have the luxury of designing for the next month or the next year. We need to may have the luxury to design for next day or next week or even next hour, because the data is changing so fast. And we've seen that in many situations where places have closed or opened and they're moving around. So some of the data, and this is some of the resources I'm using, the Johns Hopkins University platform that is giving you real-time information, and the Financial Times coronavirus latest news that is giving us indications about which markets are doing what. So I was talking to my friends in the Greek islands and they were saying, look, we need to find people, if we manage to open the tourism industry in summer 2020, we need to be able to find people that have gone at a different phase of coronavirus so we can attract this kind of customers. And we need to understand each country, where it is, and what is the situation in that country in real time. And now we've got sufficient tools to be able to look at that and understand what is the situation, where the trends are going up or the trends are going down, and how we can do that. This is based on the tourism system. This is my friend's Neil Lipier's model, which demonstrates that in every tourism situation, we've got three regions. On the one side, you've got the tourism generating region. On the other side, you've got the destination region. And in the middle, you've got the transit route. Now, what is happening right now with coronavirus is that these three areas need to be green. So those three areas need to be accessible, and they need to be able to operate, and they need to be able to serve travelers. If one of these areas is not green, it's red, then the whole system doesn't work. So it's really critical to understand, when we're looking to destinations, which destinations are going to open and how and under which circumstances, and then look at the transit regions, and then look at the destination, and then looking at the generating regions. That's why a lot of people are predicting that domestic tourism is going to go forward much faster than international tourism, and those destinations that they depend on airplanes will be a little bit more complicated. I think we're talking about real-time tourism and nowness, and it's really about looking to how this beautiful place that's called Aveiro in Portugal can actually open again, helping people to enjoy the beauty of the place. And when we're looking to real time, we're looking to location-based information, we're looking at mentions, hashtags, sentiment analysis, trend topics, keywords, and different competitors. And we need to understand how those things are all working together. And this is from Korea in the municipality of Seoul, and this is the TAPIS control system, where they're controlling the whole city by looking to cameras, by looking into indicators, and by being smart as a destination, understanding what is happening in each particular place, and learning how they can optimize the performance of the smart city based on real-time information. I think we need something like that in tourism as well. And it's all about understanding what level of alert we have got, and how can we go back a level of alert or lower a level of alert based on the real-time situation that we've got in each place. And this is for example, how many buses are out there, and what is the capacity of the buses, and that's in real time. And I was watching yesterday about artificial intelligence and how artificial intelligence is going to help us with things. This is some kind of new prototypes that are coming out, that they're looking to social distancing and whether people are actually practicing social distancing or not, and how we can use artificial intelligence to understand in real time how we can be safe. This is another example from Marriott, but I don't have the time to play it. And it's all about nowness, and nowness will bring us real-time information to create value instantly. Now, of course, when we're doing that, we're at peacetime. Right now, we're at wartime. And this is about how do you create a competitive advantage for the destination, but the methodology is exactly the same. It's really about how you can take advantage of all the information that you've got, and not only go on price or differentiation, but look into instant gratification based on the information that you've got available. And a lot of artificial intelligence, as I said, will be looking to patterns of behavior, where people are going, and how social behavior is actually happening out there, in order to be able to help us keep the distance and enable the reduction of the spread of the virus, at least for while the virus is happening. A lot of people have raised issues about privacy. A lot of people have raised a lot of issues related to who is controlling this information, but I think this is another very long discussion that we can have at some stage. But for the time being, it's really about spreading, reducing the spreading of the disease. So input, real-time data storage and real treatment, we are processing all that towards creating value, towards decision-making, towards understanding what we can do in the immediate future. I think gradually we need to also start looking into the value proposition, and we need to look into how tourism is helping us in bringing back personalization, contextualization, individualization, and enable experience, and bring people to where they need to be most. They like to be most, and to enjoy life. So a couple of more minutes. Ambient intelligence is all about bringing all the technologies together, synthesize all the innovations, and bring supply and demand together by enabling people to use all kinds of technologies to facilitate the meeting the marketplace in the middle there. And I think gradually technology will bring a lot of disruption, both at the micro and the macro level. But what we find now is that the coronavirus has brought much more disruption in the industry already. And I think we've got digitization. Digitization has become accelerating through this process, because so many of us had to learn so many new skills. And normally you would have invited me to come to somewhere near you to have the pleasure of listening to me. But now everybody is listening on Zoom, on YouTube, or any other electronic platform. So disruption has arrived already, and actually it's not the technology that's going to drive disruption, but the external factors that they're going to bring technology to facilitate disruption. Ambient intelligence brings smart systems to everyday environments and propels interconnectivity, interoperability to all systems in terms of vehicles and devices from the Internet of Everything. I think increasingly we'll see artificial intelligence, machine learning, and ambient connectivity coming together, especially with autonomous vehicles and robots and robotics, and to bring smart and interconnected environments and marketplaces. Again, this is a very long discussion, but one of the issues that we face currently is that robots can be used in hospitals or in dangerous situations. And autonomous vehicles have been used already to deliver supplies in different places where they're infected and they're in quarantine. So there's a lot of issues that they'll be coming out of technology in the near future. Ambient intelligence is mobile, it provides, it's portable, wireless, network, location sensitive and secure. It's pervasive, it's ubiquitous, interactive, interoperable, distributed and scalable. And it's ambient, it enables contextualization, personalization, adaptation, and anticipation. So we'll see a lot of those things coming into tourism very soon, and we'll bring all of those tools to enable us to revise the tourism industry towards the new realities. Because, as I said, the new realities will be new, and they'll be effectively helping us to bring back life and some new normality. I'm just giving you a lot of reference for things that I've been doing for the last few years, so you can see where all this thinking is based on, and the research that we do in Bournemouth University to develop this thinking and develop how things can go forward. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dimitrios. Thank you for that very inspirational, but also very realistic presentation. We are facing with uncertain, unseen situation, and the only possible effective way at this point is learning from each other. And I think this is probably one of the values of this kind of sessions, that we can share information. There's a lot of questions in the chat about which segments do you see recover first. I've been answering some of them in the chat, but Dimitrios, if you want to address that question.
I think you already mentioned that in your presentation, that we see more domestic markets going first, but I think realistically there'll be two markets that are going to go really fast. One is VFR, visiting friends, relatives, because a lot of people have left their parents, their loved ones somewhere, and they need to go and see and reconnect and see if everything's okay. So visiting friends, relatives will be an immediate thing, which is a little bit strange for us, because it doesn't necessarily go to destinations, because you may go to your parents' house or to the village or wherever. So VFR will be, I think, the first one, because VFR has got less risk as well, because you are going back to a familiar place, you are not, and you are looked after. So VFR is the first thing, and the second thing is business travel. Business travel will start again, because a lot of this is deferred demand, and people will need to move again and do a lot of things. And it's great that we do electronically, but I think we're going to go to the next stage and we're going to do much more. And then domestic leisure market, where we'll see pockets of activity happening. I mean, people from Bath, if Bath is open, and are coming to the beach in Bournemouth, for example. Where if London is more affected and has got more activity, it will be opening later on. So that's why we need real-time information, because we really need to understand the real-time situation, and to see where we can take people around. A lot of my friends and colleagues are so desperate to open up, but I'm asking them, are you ready for it? Have you changed your cleaning processes? Have you changed your the outline of your restaurants and your breakfast facilities, for example? Are we going to go back to buffet breakfast, or are we going to be served? Are we going to? So there's a lot of issues, operational and strategic, that we need to do. There's issues about pricing. It's about how many, if we are distancing. So, for example, if you go to a nice, beautiful restaurant, you normally have tables that the distance between tables is less than a meter, because it's utilization of space. If those tables will go to 2 meters, what's the capacity of the restaurant? And then if we've got this capacity of the restaurant, then what is the economic model of the restaurant? Would it be able to serve with the same amount of staff, with the same amount of people in the kitchen? Or do we need to change the business model? It's hugely challenging. And I think we're going to see a lot of those things in the near future. I think for the time being, because we're in the emergency, we really need to think how we can support people in need. And we really need to think about how we support the front line.
Thank you, Dimitrios. I think that's a very important point. I would probably just add the issue of bringing consumer confidence back, and the importance of providing clear, easy access information to consumers on the protocols and the measures, because considering that hopefully when we start opening up slowly, and both restaurants, transport, borders will need to adjust their protocols, destinations and companies need to make information very clearly available on their websites. People need to have very clear what expectations can they have when they arrive at a destination in terms of safety and security, first to take the decision, but also to know how to proceed. And I was reading research that said that at this point, the biggest concern in most of the consumers is getting sick during travel, getting sick at the destination, and being in quarantine in a destination. So I think all those procedures need to be considered as we move forward. Also, one of the questions that comes very much up, and it's probably in terms of you as Bournemouth University, is how do people studying tourism at this point, or we're entering the market, should look at it, considering that we're in a sector that was booming. It was one of the fastest growing, and now it probably will be, many say, one of the last to recover.
I think it's a short term. I think it's the 3 stages. Okay, the emergency situation and the situation that we face now. I think it's what can we do as a tourism industry for community. And I think what has happened is that our chef in Bournemouth University has gone into as a volunteer on the hospital, and he's cooking. Robert is cooking for everybody in the hospital, both patients and staff. And I think we've got a lot of facilities, and we've got a lot of expertise that we can help. A lot of British Airways and EasyJet, if I remember well, air crew has gone into the Nightingale Hospital in London, because they've got training on first aid, and they are supporting patients, or they are supporting the people who are supporting the patients. So on the immediate thing, I think everybody needs to come together as a community and support where we can do to actually save lives. And I think this is really, really critical. Save lives at this stage is really critical. And we've seen those who have really focused on the economy are doing really, really well, are doing really, really bad, I'm sorry. I mean, in the UK, we've got so many people that they've actually died. We've got more than 20,000 people who have died, because the statistics, they only show people who have died in hospital. We've lost our prime minister for 2 weeks now, who suffered from coronavirus and he has disappeared. While other countries like Portugal, like Greece, like New Zealand, that they've taken a much more human approach, are in a much better position not to have lost so much life. That's the emergency situation. The day after, I think there are opportunities as well on the day after, because there'll be need for entrepreneurship, innovation, and changing the way we are doing things. And I think a lot of my students who are out there and they're doing things, they'll have the capacity to actually look at their situation and redesign systems. And it's not going to be like we've always done, but there'll be, how can we take advantage in real time of the situation and develop, redesign systems and redesign our offering. And longer term, I think there's also an opportunity to actually revise a lot of the things that we're doing. Let's be honest with ourselves. Not everything we did in tourism before coronavirus will be proud of. We really need to look into issues about overcrowding. We really need to look into flows. We really need to look into what's happening at destinations and how everybody benefits and creates value. And but those things are happening later. So I think our skills, and I guess a lot of students who are graduating recently and they're starting their career, they're really afraid. But I think our skills are really, really useful. First of all, they're transferable skills. And also they'll be super useful on the next stage of tourism, because we all know that at the first opportunity, people will start traveling again. I don't think anybody will stop traveling if they had the choice. So the matter is, what the issue is to make sure that we take cover. And I said to an interview, television interview the other day, this is like a war. The only thing is that we don't see the bombs because they are microscopic. So it's really about, in a war situation, what do? You take cover, you're trying to save lives, then you go to recovery slowly, and then you're going to strategic kind of developments. And I think the skills that we're teaching our students in Bournemouth University, and I guess a lot of colleagues around the world and a lot of people are watching us, are giving those transferable skills to be able to be ready for the new realities and to bring to the tourism industry the new designs that we need in order to survive.
Thank you, Dimitrios. I think that's a very important point. Also, something that you mentioned before on real-time data and the importance for destinations. And there's some questions in the chat about sharing data and public-private sector. And I think this is something from UNWTO side as well is critical. And it's part of our recommendations to destinations is to invest in market intelligence, to invest in tourism intelligence systems. Because they're more important now than ever. If they were important in the past, they've become critical now. And they're probably the only way to start seeing, hopefully, some green shoots in some markets and orient our activities to those markets that might start to show some movement. There's also one question related to what kind of destinations will be more favorable and what can island destinations, for example, which obviously will be more impacted, but also which will have a hard time in getting international travel, probably longer than domestic recovering. What can those destinations do in these times?
I think I feel for islands because, as you know, I've worked for many, many years for islands, and I just got messages early on when you're speaking from colleagues and friends in Bali, in Mallorca, in Corfu, and in Kos Island in Greece. So I really feel for the islands. The islands, I think, on the short term, they'll probably, anything that needs airplane is going to take a little bit longer, I think, because there's a lot of consumers are not very confident to get on a plane right now. And I think what they need to do is they need to go into survival, meaning reducing costs, looking after their employees, looking after people who work on the islands, because a lot of islands are very seasonal as well. So we need to look after the seasonal employees, and we need to bring solidarity and communities together to support each other. Because let's face it, for a period of time, it will be tough. But islands have got this amazing attraction that they attract people. They attract people all the time, and they're just magic. And what's going to happen is that once people are allowed to travel, they'll be going to places where they haven't been. Having said that, it's a good time for people to invest their time, to study, to learn, to improve their marketing capabilities, to spend some time on social media, explain to people what's happening. And to be perfectly honest, a lot of people can go back to their traditions a little bit and see what have they got on the island that's unique. Because quite often you're going to an island and you see imported things from everywhere, you know, the chocolate from Switzerland, the souvenirs from China, wherever. And I think we really need to see how are we different? What are our traditions? What do we cook that's different? what is our culture? And I think it's a time when people are a little bit less stressed from the everyday operations to actually rediscover what they are there for and take advantage of that and communicate to people and learn how to do it in a better way to reduce their dependency on other members of the distribution channel, because a lot of islands are super dependent on a lot of other members of the distribution channel. So there are a lot of issues here that we can open, but there's an opportunity to actually improve their skills and engage in a much more strategic relationship with their customers and differentiate their products, discover the little places which are they need to showcase, improve their sustainability, learn how their systems can work together. It's an opportunity. It's forced on us. There's nothing we can do, but nevertheless, we've got the time to think about it. And rather than spend all our life discussing and looking at the news and all the rest of it, it's about time to invest in what we've got, differentiate ourselves, and help us to go to the next stage, I think.
Thank you, Dimitrios. I think that's a very important point, and I think this is a key point to maybe to close this session. I also want to take advantage and invite you to discover UNWTO Online Academy, where there's online training for you to have access. I think the training, both as an individual, but also for companies to invest and governments to support that investment from companies in their employees. It's critical at this point, especially if they're not in operations. It's a very good moment to ask for government support in education and in skills development that allow for that recovery. I think also I'd like to invite everyone to go to the UNWTO website. There's a COVID-19 specific area where you can find our assessments. You also can find several relevant links from the World Health Organization, with whom we work very closely. I think the nut here is that we really need to make sure that tourism is working very closely with sanitary institutions at this point. This will be the critical issue when we open, how we open, and the protocols that we need to put in place. I'd like to thank Dimitrios for joining us from that marvelous beach in Bournemouth. From me here in Madrid, also very warm thank you to all of you who've joined us. We're very sorry we couldn't take everyone's questions, but I love to see them. It also gives us a lot of food for thought. And someone was asking about the analysis of previous crises. UNWTO has just been finalizing something that will go out next week. As I was mentioning, we saw that the Americas took 3.5 years to go back to previous levels. I think this is where we need to stand. We need to think that this will be a very hard period for the sector for relatively medium term, and we need to be prepared for that and work little by little in the building blocks that will allow us to come back stronger. We do know that we are a labor-intensive sector, that we do create a lot of jobs, and also it's important for our governments to support that, because we know that supporting tourism will mean supporting the economy. And this for us is also one of our critical messages as we close. Again, stay safe, travel tomorrow, and we will see you soon here and any other webinars, and hopefully very soon in other places of the world. Take care.
Thank you, Sandra. Take care.
Thank you, Dimitrios.